Harmony of Worlds. Chapter 1. The Discovery. In the heart of New York City, nestled between towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, sat an unassuming research facility known simply as the Institute. Though its facade was modest, inside, it housed some of the most brilliant minds in the world, all dedicated to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Among these minds was Dr. Alan Carter, a young and ambitious physicist who had always been fascinated by the concept of parallel universes. Alan's interest in the multiverse was more than just academic. He had always felt there was something more to reality, something hidden just beneath the surface. As a child, he would often have vivid dreams of other worlds, places where the laws of physics were slightly different, and events played out in ways that were both familiar and strange. These dreams had inspired him to pursue a career in physics, where he could explore the mysteries of the universe. For years, Alan worked tirelessly, sifting through complex equations and conducting countless experiments, all in search of proof that parallel universes existed. His efforts had been met with skepticism from his peers, many of whom dismissed his theories as mere fantasy. But Alan was undeterred. He knew he was onto something, and one day, his persistence paid off. It was a late night at the Institute, and most of the other researchers had already gone home. Alan was alone in the lab, surrounded by glowing computer screens and stacks of papers. He was working on a new experiment, one that involved creating a highly focused energy field that could theoretically pierce the veil between universes. As he fine-tuned the parameters of the field, his heart raced with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. With a deep breath, Alan activated the field. The room was instantly filled with a low humming sound, and the air seemed to vibrate with energy. On one of the screens, a graph spiked as the field reached its peak intensity. And then, something extraordinary happened. The space in front of Alan shimmered, as if the fabric of reality itself was being stretched. A small, swirling vortex appeared in the center of the room, its edges crackling with energy. Alan stared at it in awe. He had done it. He had created a doorway to another universe. Cautiously, Alan approached the vortex. It was no larger than a grapefruit, but he could sense the immense power contained within it. He reached out with a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the edge of the vortex. For a brief moment, everything went dark. When Alan opened his eyes, he found himself in a place that was both familiar and alien. He was still in his lab, but everything seemed slightly off. The colors were more vibrant, the air was cooler, and there was a faint scent of something sweet in the air. He realized with a start that he had crossed over into a parallel universe. As Alan explored this new world, he quickly discovered that it was almost identical to his own, but with subtle differences. The layout of the lab was the same, but the equipment was more advanced. The city outside the window was still New York, but the skyline had a few extra buildings that didn't exist in his world. It was as if he had stepped into an alternate version of reality, where history had taken a slightly different course. Excited by his discovery, Alan spent hours exploring this parallel world, taking notes and gathering data. But as the night wore on, he began to notice something strange. The more time he spent in this world, the more he felt a growing sense of unease. It was as if the very fabric of reality was fraying at the edges. Objects would occasionally flicker or distort, and strange, ghostly images would appear in the corner of his vision. Realizing that something was terribly wrong, Alan hurried back to the vortex. He knew he had to return to his own world before it was too late. But as he stepped through the vortex, a wave of disorientation washed over him, and he collapsed to the floor of his lab. When he finally regained consciousness, Alan found himself back in his own world, but something was different. The room was exactly as he had left it, but the energy in the air was different. He could feel it, a kind of tension, as if the very atoms around him were vibrating with some unseen force. The vortex was gone, but the effects of his experiment lingered. Over the next few days, Alan began to notice more and more anomalies. Objects in his lab would move on their own, computers would display strange, indecipherable codes, and there were moments when he could swear he saw shadowy figures moving just out of sight. It was as if the boundaries between the two worlds had been weakened, and the effects of his journey were rippling through both realities. Alan's excitement turned to fear as he realized the full implications of what he had done. By crossing into the parallel universe, he had disrupted the delicate balance between the two worlds. The more he traveled between them, the more unstable they became. If he didn't find a way to fix things, both realities could be torn apart. Determined to set things right, Alan threw himself into his work, searching for a way to restore the balance. But as the days passed, the situation grew worse. The anomalies became more frequent, and the fabric of reality itself began to unravel. It wasn't just his lab that was affected. The entire city was beginning to experience strange and unexplainable phenomena. Time was running out. Alan knew he had to find a solution before it was too late. But as he delved deeper into his research, he began to realize that the problem was far more complex than he had anticipated. The two worlds were not just connected, they were intertwined, like two sides of the same coin. To save them, he would have to find a way to harmonize them, to bring them back into alignment. But how? The answer eluded him, and with each passing day, the situation grew more dire. The anomalies became more violent, and reality itself seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Alan was running out of time, and the fate of two worlds rested on his shoulders. Chapter 2: The Chaotic Reality. As the days turned into weeks, the situation only worsened. What began as small, almost imperceptible anomalies soon escalated into full-blown disruptions. The boundaries between the two worlds were crumbling, and the effects were becoming increasingly catastrophic. Buildings would appear and disappear in the blink of an eye, entire streets would shift and warp, and the sky would change colors at random, cycling through a spectrum of hues that defied logic. Alan's once peaceful life had become a nightmare. The lab, which had been his sanctuary, was now a place of terror. Every day brought new challenges, new horrors that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Objects would phase in and out of existence, people would vanish only to reappear moments later, and the very air seemed charged with a malevolent energy. The city outside was no better. Reports of strange occurrences flooded the news. Cars driving themselves into buildings, people walking through walls, and entire neighborhoods disappearing overnight. Panic gripped the population, and the authorities were powerless to stop the chaos. Alan knew he was responsible. His experiment had unleashed something terrible, something that was now threatening to destroy both worlds. But despite his guilt, he couldn't stop. He was the only one who could fix this, the only one who understood the true nature of the problem. But the solution remained frustratingly out of reach. Desperate for answers, Alan began to experiment again, this time with even greater urgency. He knew the risks, but he had no choice. He needed to find a way to stabilize the two worlds before it was too late. But as he delved deeper into the mysteries of the multiverse, he began to realize just how little he truly understood. One night, as Alan was working late in the lab, he was visited by a figure from the other world. It was a woman, dressed in strange, otherworldly clothes, with eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. She introduced herself as Mira, a scientist from the parallel universe. Like Alan, she had been experimenting with the multiverse, and she had also felt the effects of their world's destabilization. Mira explained that their worlds were not just parallel, they were mirror images of each other, bound together in ways that neither of them had fully understood. When Alan crossed over, he had disrupted the delicate balance between them, causing a ripple effect that was now threatening to tear both realities apart. But there was hope. Mira had been studying the anomalies in her world, and she believed she had found a way to restore the balance. It would require both of them to work together, using their combined knowledge to harmonize the two worlds. But it would be dangerous. The process would involve opening a larger, more stable portal between the worlds, and if they failed, it could lead to the complete collapse of both realities. Alan knew they had no choice. The longer they waited, the worse the situation would become. Together, they began to formulate a plan. They would use the portal technology Alan had developed, combined with the energy field Mira had discovered, to create a bridge between the worlds. This bridge would allow them to synchronize the two realities, restoring the balance and preventing further disruptions. But as they worked, The anomalies grew more frequent and more severe. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. They would only have one chance to get it right. If they failed, both worlds would be lost. Summary of the story. As the story progresses, Alan and Mira continue their work, facing numerous challenges and setbacks. The anomalies become increasingly dangerous, threatening not only their lives but the lives of everyone in both worlds. They discover that there is a mysterious force behind the destabilization, something that exists outside of both realities, a being or entity that feeds on chaos and is actively working to prevent them from succeeding. In a climactic final chapter, Alan and Mira manage to open the bridge between the worlds. However, the entity that has been disrupting their efforts makes one last attempt to stop them. In a tense and dramatic showdown, they must confront this entity, using all of their knowledge and strength to defeat it and restore harmony to the multiverse. In the end, they succeed, but not without great sacrifice. The process of harmonizing the worlds is incredibly taxing, and they both suffer immense physical and mental strain. But their efforts pay off, and the balance between the two realities is restored. The anomalies cease, and the two worlds are once again stable. However, the experience changes them both. Alan realizes the dangers of tampering with forces beyond his understanding and decides to dedicate his life to ensuring that no one else repeats his mistakes. Mira returns to her world, but she and Alan remain in contact, working together to monitor the multiverse and prevent any future disruptions. The story ends on a hopeful note, with both Alan and Mira looking towards the future, determined to protect their worlds and the delicate balance that holds them together. Chapter 3. Echoes of the Past. The bridge between the two worlds was a marvel of science and imagination, a swirling vortex of energy suspended in midair, pulsating with an almost hypnotic rhythm. It was the culmination of weeks of intense work, countless sleepless nights, and more than a few close calls with the anomalies that continued to plague both worlds. Alan and Mira stood side by side, gazing at the bridge they had created. The tension between them was palpable, a mixture of fear, determination, and something else, an unspoken bond forged in the fires of shared adversity. "This is it," Alan said, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and trepidation. "Are you sure we're ready?" Mira nodded, though her expression betrayed a flicker of doubt. "We have to be. If we don't act now, the anomalies will only get worse. We might not get another chance." They had spent hours fine-tuning the parameters, calculating the exact energy levels needed to stabilize the bridge. The plan was to step through the portal together, each carrying a device that would synchronize the energy fields of both worlds. Once inside the heart of the bridge, they would activate the devices simultaneously, restoring harmony to the two realities. But there was a catch. The process was inherently unstable, and there was a very real risk that it could fail, catastrophically. If their calculations were off by even a fraction, the energy released could tear both worlds apart, creating a chain reaction that would annihilate everything in existence. "Are you ready?" Mira asked, her voice soft but resolute. Alan took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." They stepped forward, the swirling energy of the bridge washing over them as they entered the portal. The sensation was indescribable, like being pulled through a tunnel of light and sound, with reality itself bending and warping around them. For a moment, they felt as if they were floating in a sea of pure energy, untethered from time and space. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sensation ended. They found themselves standing in a vast, empty void, the two worlds overlapping and merging into a single, surreal landscape. The ground beneath their feet was a patchwork of different terrains, concrete streets, grassy fields, barren deserts, constantly shifting and changing as the realities struggled to reconcile their differences. "This is it," Alan said, glancing around. The heart of the anomaly. They could see it now, a swirling mass of chaotic energy at the center of the void, a black hole of sorts, where the fabric of both worlds was being torn apart. It pulsed with a malevolent energy, sending out shockwaves that rippled through the void, distorting everything in their path. "We need to be quick," Mira said, pulling out her synchronization device. If that thing gets any stronger, it could destabilize the entire bridge. Alan nodded and pulled out his own device, a small, handheld apparatus that glowed with a soft blue light. They had synchronized the devices before entering the portal, but the final calibration had to be done here, in the heart of the anomaly. On 3, Alan said, his fingers hovering over the activation button. 1, 2, 3. They pressed the buttons simultaneously, and the devices sprang to life, emitting a low hum as they began to synchronize the energy fields. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The chaotic energy around them began to stabilize, the ripples in the void smoothing out as the two realities started to merge. But then, something went wrong. The synchronization devices began to overheat, the blue light on Alan's device flickering erratically. The ground beneath their feet started to shake, and the swirling mass of energy at the center of the void began to pulse faster, growing larger and more unstable.
No.
Alan shouted, frantically trying to adjust the settings on his device. It's too much. The energy levels are spiking. Mira was struggling with her own device, her face etched with concentration. We need to stabilize it. Try rerouting the power to the secondary circuits. But before they could react, the synchronization devices overloaded, releasing a massive surge of energy that knocked them both off their feet. The void around them erupted in chaos, the merging realities tearing apart at the seams. Alan could feel the fabric of reality itself unraveling, the ground beneath him dissolving into nothingness. For a brief, terrifying moment, he thought they had failed, that they were about to be swallowed up by the very anomaly they had created. But then, something miraculous happened. The chaotic energy around them began to coalesce, forming a bright, radiant light that enveloped them in a warm, soothing glow. The light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. And then, silence. Chapter 4. The Guardian. When Alan and Mira awoke, they found themselves lying on a soft, grassy hill, the warm sun shining down on them from a clear blue sky. The air was crisp and clean, and the world around them was peaceful and serene. For a moment, Alan thought they had somehow made it back to their own world, that the synchronization had worked after all. But as he sat up and looked around, he realized that this place was different. Too perfect, too ideal. It was as if they had stepped into a dream. Mira, he said, shaking her gently. Wake up. Mira groaned and slowly opened her eyes. Where are we? I don't know, Alan replied, helping her to her feet. But I don't think we're in either of our worlds. As they stood there, taking in their surroundings, they noticed a figure approaching from the distance. It was a tall, humanoid being, dressed in flowing robes of pure white, with a serene, almost otherworldly expression on its face. Its eyes glowed with a soft, golden light, and as it drew closer, Alan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. Welcome, the being said in a voice that resonated through the air like a gentle breeze. You have done well to reach this place. Who are you? Mira asked, her voice trembling slightly. I am the Guardian, the being replied. I am the caretaker of the multiverse, the one who maintains the balance between all realities. Alan's mind raced. The Guardian? Could this being be the force that had been manipulating the anomalies, the one that had interfered with their attempts to synchronize the worlds? You caused this, Alan said, his voice rising with anger. You are the one who disrupted the balance. You almost destroyed everything. The Guardian shook its head, its expression unchanging. I did not cause the disruption. I merely sought to protect the balance. Your actions, though well-intentioned, threatened to destabilize the entire multiverse. I intervened to prevent that from happening. Mira stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. Then why didn't you help us? Why didn't you stop the anomalies from happening in the first place? The anomalies were a natural consequence of your actions, the Guardian explained. When you crossed into the parallel universe, you disrupted the harmony between the two realities. The anomalies were an attempt by the multiverse to correct that imbalance. But your continued interference only made things worse. Alan felt a wave of guilt wash over him. The Guardian was right. He had been so focused on proving his theories, on exploring the unknown, that he hadn't considered the consequences of his actions. He had nearly destroyed 2 worlds in his pursuit of knowledge. "What do we do now?" Alan asked, his voice subdued. How do we fix this?" "The multiverse is in a delicate state," the Guardian said. "The synchronization you attempted was flawed, but it was not without merit. The energy you released has temporarily stabilized the 2 worlds, but the balance is still fragile. You must return to your own worlds and ensure that the boundaries are maintained. The bridge you created must be closed permanently." Mira looked at Alan, her expression somber. "We can't continue our work. It's too dangerous." Alan nodded in agreement. "We've already caused enough damage. It's time to stop." The Guardian raised its hand, and a soft, golden light enveloped them. "I will send you back to your respective worlds. The bridge will be closed, and the balance will be restored. But remember, the multiverse is vast and interconnected. Any actions you take can have far-reaching consequences. Be mindful of the balance." With those words, the light around them grew brighter, and the world began to fade. Alan felt a sense of peace wash over him as the Guardian's presence receded, and he knew that they had made the right decision. Chapter 5. The Final Farewell. Alan awoke in his lab, the familiar hum of the equipment and the faint scent of coffee in the air. It felt surreal, as if the events of the past few days had been nothing more than a dream. But the scorch marks on the floor, the disarray of the lab, and the absence of the vortex confirmed that it had all been real. The bridge between the worlds was gone, closed off by the Guardian's power. The anomalies had ceased, and the city outside was slowly returning to normal. But Alan knew that things would never be the same. The knowledge of what lay beyond the veil of reality, the dangers and wonders of the multiverse, had changed him forever. As he began to clean up the lab, his thoughts turned to Mira. She was back in her own world now, but he knew that their connection would remain. They had shared something extraordinary, something that few people could ever understand. And though they were separated by the boundaries of their respective realities, he felt a deep sense of kinship with her. A few days later, Alan received a message on his secure communication channel, a message from Mira. It was brief, just a few words, but it brought a smile to his face. "The balance is restored. Stay safe, Alan, until we meet again." He typed out a quick reply. "You too, Mira. Take care." And with that, he shut down the communication link, feeling a sense of closure. The adventure was over, but the lessons he had learned would stay with him for the rest of his life. Epilogue. A new beginning. Months passed, and life gradually returned to normal. The city repaired the damage caused by the anomalies, and the world moved on, blissfully unaware of the near catastrophe that had been averted. Alan continued his work at the Institute, but he shifted his focus away from the multiverse, dedicating himself instead to more grounded, practical research. He became a mentor to young scientists, sharing his knowledge and experiences while warning them of the dangers of hubris and the pursuit of power without responsibility. But every now and then, when the night was quiet and the stars shone brightly in the sky, Alan would find himself gazing up at the heavens, wondering what lay beyond the limits of his reality. He knew that the multiverse was still out there, vast and mysterious, filled with wonders and dangers beyond comprehension. And though he had vowed never to meddle with it again, a part of him couldn't help but wonder what the future might hold. After all, the multiverse was infinite, and in its infinite possibilities, anything was possible. As he stood there, lost in thought, a shooting star streaked across the sky, a brief flash of light in the darkness. Alan smiled to himself, feeling a sense of peace. The balance had been restored, and the worlds were safe.